Nehru Center has been we did the debut Culture Day, the Culture and Creative Economy Day, in partnership with the India Global Forum last year, and this is the second Culture Day as a part of the fifth India-UK week of the IGF. We are delighted to be hosting this once again. The culture economy, the creative economy, is one of the sectors in which the India-UK cooperation, I think, can be world-beating. And the more partnerships we build among creatives in India and the UK, the better it will be for the global creative economy. Thank you so much for coming here. This is being broadcast online as well. And welcome, and I hope you enjoy the conversation that happens over this morning. To kick off, my counterpart from India, Alison Barrett, the country director India of the British Council, she's going to make her opening remarks. Alison, come on board.
So maybe I should say namaste if I'm on Indian soil here this morning. So good morning, my name's Alison Barrett. I'm the Director of the British Council in India and also the Minister of Culture and Education for the British High Commission in India. So I'm really, really happy to be here with my counterpart Amish and welcome everyone this morning. So this is a really exciting opportunity. Partnering with the India Global Forum has been a real pleasure. We had an excellent education roundtable yesterday, and I'm really looking forward to the series of discussions this morning. Thank you so much to my colleagues, Rehana, I don't know where she is, oh there she is, Rehana Mughal, who's really helped drive and put this together, and my colleague Paramita, who's somewhere in the audience. Oh, she's there at the back. So thank you so much for everything you've done. So John Newbegin, who I think is in the audience, I saw him earlier. Yes, I thought I saw you earlier. Good morning. He said very famously that creative economy will be the fuel of the 21st century. And I think India and the UK contribute probably a disproportionate amount of that magic fuel to the sectors. So it's great to see such collaboration. The last few months have seen significant global acknowledgement of the contribution that India makes to the sector. We've seen Natu Natu win an Oscar. We've seen The Elephant Whisperer win an Oscar. We've seen Daljit Dosanjh get mentioned by the US Secretary of State and perform at Coachella. There are world legends that too many to mention, but you know, Tagore, Amrita Shergill, A.R. Rahman. I mean, it's just a fantastically rich sector and just a pleasure to be part of it in a very, very small way. So over the last couple of years, the British Council has worked with FICCI in India to commission a series of reports looking at the creative industries in India and really trying to make the contribution that it makes more visible to the powers that be. So the Taking the Temperature reports demonstrated that about 2.5% of India's GDP comes from this rich sector. And it's really something that we shouldn't ignore, and we should celebrate and see how we can support more. So in the UK, the funding bodies such as the Arts Council England, who are here today, Creative Scotland, the HM Treasury with its work on tax, they all support gift aid, they all support and help the sector really thrive and grow. And this is expertise and learning that we are surfacing in India. There's so much that we can do to strengthen the mutual prosperity of both countries through the creative industries. But to help make it more robust and more connected and ready for the future in India, the research that we commissioned recommended 4 things. So firstly, the need for a much more organized and interconnected sector that spans across the different art forms, because we know that all the sectors are interconnected and depend on each other. Secondly, the establishment of a creative economy task force, some kind of cross-government initiative to enable the 14 different ministries in India who all have a culture and creative industries remit to come together and support the sector to grow. A stronger regulatory framework and much more financial investment and support for the sector, which I'm sure we would all welcome. But overall, it's about taking a very long-term view and making sure that the sector's looking at the world-beating performances like Natu Natu and the sort of stars of the sector, but also really supporting the grassroots people who are emerging in the sector. So something like 200 million working in the sector, in the non-formal, informal sectors, mainly women, how can we support them to really grow and thrive? And that's one of the priorities for the British Council, working together to connect new and emerging artists so that they can develop their skills together, build their capacity, build their understanding and appreciation of each other's cultures, but also support their livelihoods, which is really, really important for their long-term future. So just finally, the word for culture in many Indian languages is Sanskriti, and that's an amalgam of Shristi and of Prakriti. Now, this is something that Meenakshi Lekhi, who's the Minister of Culture, sort of taught me at the second culture working group of the G20. And together, that means nature. So you've got creation and nature coming together in the word culture. And I think that's a really important concept for us to hold on to. That the fuel of the 21st century, it's green fuel that we need. It's about connecting global mindsets. It's about bringing people together to tackle some of the greatest global challenges that we face. I'm really pleased that you've got downstairs the Wood Wide Web, which is one of the Season of Culture funded grantee programs under our 75th anniversary program. And that's a collaboration between Farmers for Forests in India and the Kew Gardens Library. And they are really bringing AI and artistic approaches together to help us think about the importance of sustainability and protecting nature. So do have a look at that while you're here. So finally, with India's presidency of the G20 and the government of India's ambitions for One Earth, One Family, One Future, the India-UK Roadmap 2030 is driving the engagement between our two countries. British Council is really delighted to be working with the Nehru Centre, with the Ministry of Culture and with the Department for Culture, Media and Sport in the UK on a programme of policy development and mutual exchange to support cultural innovation and to really help the creative industries thrive. So really happy to be with you today. And now I think it's my job to introduce the Secretary of State, Lucy Fraser, who's going to join us by video to give us a few words from her perspective, and look forward to that. Thank you very much.
Sorry not to be there with you today. It looks like you have an excellent day ahead of you with a packed agenda, and one that I know the India Global Forum has done a great job of coordinating. India and the UK share so much culturally. The UK is one of the world's oldest democracies, and India is the world's largest democracy. And I believe ours has always been an incredibly special relationship.
Technical issues, so we'll play the video in a bit. But in the interim, let me introduce Rehana Mogal on stage. Rehana, please, stage is all yours.
Thank you very much. I'd like my panelists to join me, if they would, please. So my name is Rehana Mogal, and I am the Director of Creative Economy at the British Council. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you today. So namaste, assalamu alaikum, sabah al khair, and Eid Mubarak to anybody that's celebrating. My mum is, and she's not very happy about me being here. But anyway, I'm happy to be here. Welcome to my panelists.
Hello. There you go.
Okay, so are we ready to kick off? So this session is focused on crafting futures, transforming livelihoods, and supporting local entrepreneurship at a global scale. We've just heard that India is hosting the G20 this year, and a lot of effort is going into supporting a more inclusive approach and thinking about the uniqueness of India and its strengths, particularly given that India is the largest producer of crafts worldwide. So in this session, what we want to look at is the positive impact of the informal sector of Indian SMEs, and the government of India is taking steps to empower the quality, scale and reach of local artisan communities, Vocal for Local, a movement that embraces the potential of self-reliant entrepreneurship, highlights the need to create effective policies, funding and strategies that uplift and support these cultural industries and grassroots level while eradicating social political barriers. So, I'm going to explore with my panel today in 20 minutes how can we create systems that enable the development of local crafts and their representation in national and global economies. So, on my panel today, I have the fantastic Anita Dongre, who's a designer and founder of House of Anita Dongre. She's one of India's most prolific designers. Anita has been at the forefront of fashion for almost 30 years. She's credited with not only reinventing fashion for the modern woman, but bringing a culture of mindful fashion to generations of women, including Bollywood celebrities, global celebrities and royalty, such as Priyanka Chopra, Beyonce, Kate Middleton, Hillary Clinton. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you, Rhiannon.
And also we have with us today Dr. Maria Henderson, who's the Chief of Creative Economy Programme at UNCTAD. Dr. Maria Henderson has over 20 years of experience. She supports developing countries in leveraging their creative economy for sustainable development, employment generation and poverty reduction. She's also got a background in international trade, having worked at the Mission of Argentina in Geneva, and she's also worked at the House of Commons, and she's authored publications on trade and development. Welcome, please, Dr. Maria Henderson. And then my third panellist is Professor Kate Goldsworthy. Kate Goldsworthy is the Chair of Circular Design and Innovation and Co-Director of the Centre for Circular Design. Kate is a designer and academic who merges material science, industry and design through practice-led research. And a lot of her work focuses on creative economy and circular economy. And she's had notable commissions from the Science Museum, the Victoria and Albert Museum and the Fine Arts Museum in Boston. So that is my fabulous panel. So let's kick off the discussion. And perhaps I could start with you, Anita. You've obviously set up a very successful business. And how are you working on sustaining the intricate crafts and cultural heritage of India? And why do you think it's important to take work back to the villages?
Rihanna, I'll start with this is very personal to me as a woman in India. I started my career 40 years ago. And as a student of fashion design, I come from a very, very traditional family. I'm born, brought up in Mumbai, but my roots are Jaipur. And traditional Indian families did not allow women to work. So I literally come from a family where I graduated from fashion school, but I was told that you can't take up a job because हमारे घर की लड़कियां काम नहीं करती हैं. I faced a lot of opposition. I was the rebel in the family, got my way, started my business with 2 sewing machines in my balcony, was very driven, very passionate. Today we employ 2,500 people and thousands of artisans all over the country. And I really feel India's growth is its women, because if you economically, women in my country need to be empowered. Even 40 years later, there is so much change we need to bring in, especially in the villages of India. So the only way you can empower a woman is by economically empowering her. Now you yourself, somebody mentioned earlier that we have almost 100 or 200 million artisans in India. So women are taught craft in India, and it's a skill that they learn from mother, grandmother. So today, my biggest challenge and what I find exciting about my design today is how I can use design and creativity to empower somebody sitting 400 kilometers away in a village in a house. So there are 2 points, there are 2 attributes to this work that I do with village artisans that really excite me. Is firstly, I believe that you need to empower a woman in a village. You've empowered the whole village. The minute the woman is empowered, there's better education for her daughter, and she really keeps that whole family unit going. She gets a lot of respect in a village the minute she starts earning money, and she can do that in the comfort of her home without having to move to a city or to migrate to cities, because I think our cities are overcrowded. So to take work back to Indian villages is extremely important. What I really do is I take design, like for example, the dress I'm wearing today. It could have just been an ordinary black dress, right? But you can see these...
my ordinary black outfit.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. Now, this has these little white dots, and this is not a print. This is the craft of bandhani, which is practiced in Rajasthan and Gujarat. So there's a woman who will be sitting in a house, she'll finish all her housework, and then she'll take this fabric and tie these little knots on the dress, and something like this might take her about a week. A sari that you wear to a wedding might take her 2 months. And that to me is empowerment. So when I'm wearing a piece of craft, there's so much satisfaction in knowing that this garment that I have, bought with my money as a consumer is empowering a woman 400 kilometers somewhere in a remote village, and this is giving her monthly livelihood, her respect in the society. I work with so many women artisans who, when I go to the villages and I visit them, and they say that the money we've started making today, the village panchayat, the men look at us with more respect. So it's truly, truly a game changer. And then if you were to look at it as India as a country, I've got some statistics which say that women in India represent 48% of the population, yet they contribute only 17% of the GDP compared to 40% in China. Only 45% of women in India aged 15 to 29 are engaged in any education, employment or training, which contrasts with 6.5% of men. There are only 4.7% CEOs and 7.7% of board seats were held by women in 2021. So you can just know what a huge difference craft can make to empower a huge population of our country. And
brilliant.
And that's what we try to do. And we do this with in a lot of cities, we do this with government intervention, and I think that's where the government plays a large role. In Maharashtra, we run 7 training centers, which is a partnership with the local panchayat and the local government, where we train, we empower them, with skills where they are not skilled.
And what would you say in terms of, because you've said that the craft is handed from generation to generation, the techniques are handed from generation to generation. What role do you think education, universities, colleges have to play in perhaps thinking about maybe new innovations to support that traditional making, but looking at it using perhaps new technologies, more sustainable ways of producing? What are your thoughts on education?
The first thing, the women artisans, when I started working with them 8 years ago, and 2 years down the line, I asked them what you all want. They all asked for smartphones. Today, a woman artisan in a village of India has her own smartphone. As she's embroidering her design, she takes a picture, sends it to me on WhatsApp. I can approve it sitting in the city. So technology and education has a huge role. We have to basically train that woman, craftswoman sitting in the village to become an entrepreneur. Today we have so many artisans who started out alone and who have groups of 20, 30, 40 women under them. So they're really all budding entrepreneurs. So to encourage that entrepreneurship skill in her, you definitely need to equip her with technology and education both. It will play a very key role.
Thank you very much. And what's your one wish in terms of India hosting the G20 presidency? What do you really want to see come out of that?
I want to see transformation in India, and I want to see transformation for the women in India, because there's so much that needs to be done.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm now going to move us over to Dr. Maria Henderson, if I may. Can you please speak a little bit about how you think the unique edge of the informal creative economy, which Anita just spoke about, can be harnessed and supported with policies to ensure fair growth?
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. So I'm from UNTAPPed, this is a small agency in Geneva doing creative economy. And we just launched last year a report. It's called Creative Economy Outlook. You can just Google UNTAPPed Creative Economy Outlook and you will find lots of figures that I will mention now. And one of the things we mentioned in the report is that creative industries we have very hard time in getting reliable data because of the informal character of the industries. In fact, creative industries are it's a cottage industry where there are very low levels of production, niche products. They are reliable. There are lots of industries that are produced in rural areas where there are no distribution channels. So they need to be strengthened. And there are a lot of obstacles, particularly in the global south, in terms of exploiting creative industries for sustainable development. However, the crafts industry is a very unique industry in terms of poverty alleviation, because most of the artisans live in rural areas. So it's a key issue, it's a key industry to take into account if we want to fight poverty. We show that in the report, but we also wrote another report which is called Creative Industries 4.0, meaning the 4.0 revolution, and just shows how to mix, how to use the digital revolution to harness the creative industries, including the crafts, handicrafts. And we mention in the report how there are baby steps still, but there are many handicrafts, very traditional handicrafts, that are starting to use the digital marketplace, not only as a means of distribution, making distribution more sustainable and more democratic in a way, and reaching markets that were not reachable before, but at the same time at the creation and the production process, where they can be connected with different producers, maybe not necessarily in their little town. So this has a kind of a revolutionary impact, but it cannot be done by the artisans alone. So it has to be, there has to be a concerted effort, as the British Council Director was mentioning, to bring together the policymakers, the NGOs, the private sector, to be able to provide a space and give the training that is necessary, because generally artisans and small business, they are kind of, and artists are reluctant to go into maybe business practices, or very, go into the money or making of their crafts. So it's important to support them in that regard. And that doesn't mean that we're going to provide subsidies no, which means that we're going to work together to elevate their business. I just wanted to give you some figures. In the report, you mentioned about the gender inequality. In the report, you will see that there are a lot of still gender inequality, despite the fact that women represent a large majority of the workers and have this function of preserving heritage in many of the crafts. But in the report, you will see that some countries provided some figures, and unfortunately, in gender pay, there is a gender gap pay. For example, in Argentina, it's 28%, in Australia, 30%, 45% in New Zealand. Also, there are disparities in gender in the ILO. The International Labour Organization has just published a publication that looks at the arts, entertainment, and recreation sectors. And on average, women account for 26% of junior management positions in the arts and entertaining and recreation services, which include crafts, and only 29% on senior positions. So coming back to the informal sector, I think despite the fact that we have difficulty in finding hard data, may I just say that India is the largest producer and exporter or creative crafts. So there are official figures that support that. In terms of creative goods, so crafts are a portion of the total creative goods. The UK is the fourth largest exporter, world exporter of creative goods worldwide, according to our figures, and India is the 10th largest exporters of creative goods in the world. Now, what the director of British Council was saying, and also the director of this institute, was the importance of the UK-India relationship. And one of the key findings that we find in the report is that creative industries are actually the South-South cooperation is very important, trade cooperation is very important of creative industries. One of the key issues is the language. So it is very, very important, obviously, considering that the two economies are one of the largest exporters of creative goods. I think the synergies and the promotion of cooperation, you know, between the UK and India can actually be very, very beneficial, and that includes also through trade agreements and facilitating to get barriers to trade down.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maria Henderson. I'd now like us to move to Kate Goldsworthy. You must have seen many new materials being used. Can you please tell us a little about how makers in India could benefit from some of the new innovations and sustainable materials that are being developed here in the UK?
Yeah, thank you. Well, my role, I suppose, in my career the last 20 years or so has been very much in this sort of new material area and thinking about sustainability and more the circular economy in terms of, you know, how do we change this industry that is extremely polluting globally. And actually what's interesting is just, it sounds on the surface quite a different space than we've been hearing about already, but actually we've come to a point that I think really connects. We've been for the last few years working on a creative industries cluster program based in the UK that has been not focused on working with big industry. It's been much more about connecting academia and the small and micro businesses in the UK that often are very heritage based, are very or new innovation technology, but sort of working hand in hand with academia to access funding, to access support, to sort of really answer the challenges that they bring to the table. And where this starts to connect more with the topics of today, we've for the last 2 years been working with the British Council on a programme called New Landscapes. So we're taking that idea of very focused projects with SMEs and micro business and taking that into collaborations with the UK and ODA countries, and it's been hugely successful for a very small, in sort of real terms, amount of funding. So we've launched 10 micro projects, one of which is a collaboration between a Welsh initiative in the UK that runs a series of repair cafes. And so they wanted to bring the knowledge that they had gained through this initiative of using digital technology, creating a platform where repair techniques could be shared, brought together in communities, you know, for the purposes of circularity, circular economy and sustainability, but working with a partner in New Delhi to bring that sort of system to the incredible craft makers in India, the kind that you were talking about, these sort of incredible textile skills that not only can produce beautiful new clothing, but also could be involved in repair and upcycling.
Craft is perfect for recycling.
Exactly. So it's again, I think it's focused, the big picture for us, or for me personally, is, you know, sustainability of the industry, but actually along the way, incredible sort of potential for skills development, training, collaboration across the partnership and entrepreneurship, as you were mentioning.
So would you say, from your observations, that there's a growing movement in people actually caring about where their clothes are coming from, caring about recycling? Are you seeing that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, we've had incredible initiatives like Fashion Revolution, sort of, that's been running for the last 10 years, that really does bring attention to that. But I think also, you know, ecology and environment is a global problem. We so often, you know, we try and do what we can in the UK, but the effects and the supply chain and the whole fashion system is global. So I think the more we can have these bilateral collaborations, the better.
I do think it's really small and it needs to snowball into a massive movement, and I think forums like this will encourage that to snowball. It needs to get much larger to have a better impact.
Yeah,
It's very niche right now.
Yeah. What about some of the strange new materials? I mean, I've heard about things like mushroom leather and growing your own textiles. Is there room for that in the market?
No, absolutely. I mean, we've everything from, you know, the technology in fibre to fibre recycling, so being able to literally take clothes and break them back down to the fibre and rebuild them is happening. But that also applies from everything to agricultural waste. So, you know, textiles made from coffee bean waste or red wine waste, or, you know, one particular company we work with a lot uses the leaves from pineapples. So, you know, Anana Sonam, which is not based in India, but they have incredible connections to the agriculture, and then they turn them into beautiful fabric. So I think, I mean, that's
Brilliant.
a whole nother world.
Okay, well, my time is up. It's clearly not long enough to have an in-depth conversation, but I hope that my panelists have given you a little bit of a snapshot into the areas that they work in, and I hope that you will have the opportunity to speak to them while you're here and to learn a little bit more. But what I've picked up from here is that there is a gender gap. There are still issues around equality. There are lots of positive ideas that are emerging, like, for example, the recycling cafes that you mentioned in Wales, and also this really important link around intergenerational learning, with people from one generation passing on the skill to another generation. So important. And I hope that while India has the G20 presidency, that this idea of retaining that intergenerational learning will continue, and that we will see also these ideas of thinking about climate, being climate conscious, really, as you say, mushrooming and becoming much bigger than they currently are. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking my excellent panelists. Thank you. I believe I'm now going to invite Amish and his special guest, who are up next after us, but I think we're having a photograph first. Here? Just here, just here.
Oh, hang on.
Please,
no,
Anita.
I'm not going.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. With your special guest, I was told.
Thank you, Rihanna. There are 4 chairs here. 2 will be taken away. I'm back, and I am here with a truly special guest, someone who needs no introduction, a dear friend, Sonam Kapoor, one of the finest actresses in India, a philanthropist, a fashion icon, and also a very good reader. She has good taste in books. Sonam Kapoor, please come up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
In complimenting me, he's complimented himself. So should we sit?
Please. We have a short period of time out here, and I have 5 questions
Okay,
for you, Sonam. These aren't rapid fire,
okay,
and they're not controversial.
okay. I usually do well with those.
The first thing that strikes me is, how has your journey as an actor in Bollywood been like since you started your career? And in your observation, what are some of the aspects in the industry that have culturally evolved with recent times? There have been changes across the world. How has this impacted Bollywood? There have been changes in India. So what are the changes you're seeing in how Bollywood is working?
So, I mean, I've been working for 20 years, believe it or not. So I was 17 when I joined the film industry as an assistant director with Sanjay Leela Bansali on Black. And my first film released when I was 21, and I'm not shy about my age. I'm 38 now. So it's been a long
You
time.
don't look a day older than 22.
Oh, thank you. It's very kind and charming. And I feel there have been changes, slowly but surely, where there has been more roles for me, where there weren't as many female-oriented centric roles. I have had the opportunity to make Khoobsurat, Neerja, Veeredi Wedding, Aisha, and they've all been pretty successful. And that's also because the audience has changed. You know, you usually make films with the audience, and the film industry has been open about it, but it hasn't been quick enough. The gender pay gap is humongous, and I don't think that will be narrowing very soon, unfortunately. But the roles have become meatier for sure, you know, with Alia and Deepika and Anushka, all strong actors, at least in my generation of actors, have had the opportunity to make, or they pursued films where they could be the central character. And obviously directors like Sanjay Leela Bansali, Rakesh Mehra, and Sujoy Ghosh and Shashank Ghosh, who've been my directors, have all kind of promoted that. So I guess it's that has changed. And obviously with OTT, with like Netflix coming in, Amazon, now Jio Cinemas, content has also evolved in a way where it's not traditional Indian films anymore, where there's a 3-hour film with an interval and then it's a traditional love story. I think the content has become more varied. It has more depth, and it's gone the other way as well. Like in the cinemas, you're watching things that don't really make sense. I mean, they're a lot of fun, and commercially they do very, very well. But so there's you know how there's the gap between the rich and the poor has increased, and so has the gap between content increased. So there's like super hyper commercial stuff, and then there's not very commercial stuff, and in between there's that has also gone a little bit because of the way people are consuming content.
No, but as you've shown with Neerja, that you can do something meaningful and it can work.
That was
as well.
before the pandemic.
Fair. As a critically acclaimed actress, what role do you think the Indian film industry can play in fostering stronger cultural bonds between the UK and India, and indeed with the rest of the world?
So what is great is that the UK makes it easier for films to be shot here. So a lot of films have been shot here. And I feel like if there's more films being shot here and more, you know, we're already using technicians from here, but actors can also work from the UK in India. So the thing is, our Indian audience is so vast. Who watch Indian films is so vast, right? So it's not only Indians that watch it, it's all South Asians watch Indian films, Middle Easterns watch Indian films, Africans watch Indian films. So we already have such a huge audience, and I feel it's not recognized as much like in the press and in the media. So if it's covered a lot more and they understand the importance, like even when you're getting in now, you know, international brands are taking Indian actors as brand ambassadors, and they are showcasing them as more because they realize the power of the Indian celebrity, to understand how far-reaching how far-reaching we can have people, we can sell things to people basically. And so it's interesting to see that now, since the world is getting smaller because of social media and OTT, etc., the recognition is coming easier, but I feel like the international media can do more. I think the governments do whatever they can do. Yeah.
And there's the power of the Indian diaspora as well.
Exactly.
Massive.
Huge. That's what I meant. Yeah.
You did refer to it, a bit in your first question. But if I can probe a little deeper, as a woman in Bollywood, and there are some from the film industry out here.
Okay.
What is the advice you'd give to young actresses who'd like to join the film industry? What are the challenges you think they would have to face? And
just work. You have to work very hard, and it's all luck. I promise you, you have to be.
Get lucky.
You have to. It's all luck. I promise you, it's all kismat. You know, where you are, who you're born to. That's a huge privilege. But also where you are, because my father wasn't born to my grandfather was a secretary, right? But he was at the right place at the right time, and he did a film with Mani Ratnam, who was his first filmmaker, his first film, and he became one of the biggest filmmakers, right? So it's all kismat, I feel. But if you're really passionate about it, like for me, even though I am my father's daughter, I went on my own to Sanjay, who had never worked with my father before, and my father and my mother had kept me completely not exposed to the audience, so nobody knew who I was, what I looked like, any of that. And I just one day walked in because I heard because I lived in Bombay, from some of my friends who were assistants at that time, saying that, he needs an assistant. So I walked into his office, and at the same time, girls were walking in to audition for a role. And he thought I was one of those girls, not knowing who I was. And I walked in, and he decided to cast me. So I think there's always a, and I was an assistant first for 2 years before I started acting in his film, but I think it's all about destiny. But if you keep working hard, if you're talented, see, hard work, timing is everything, but timing with hard work is what is the...
So true.
So if you keep working hard and keep working on your craft, if you just and if you don't give up, the time will come. Some time will come. It'll somehow happen, like Amitabh Bachchan only became successful after his mid-30s. He kept trying and trying and trying and trying, and then eventually something clicked. He was always a second lead, it was Rajesh Khanna. And I think like Neena Gupta, Masaba, my friend Masaba's mother, she's had a fresh start now, and she's working non-stop. So that always happens. It's just you have to work, and if you have the conviction, you can keep doing it. Shah Rukh Khan, he did like I don't know how many TV shows, and came from Delhi, and it's a matter of timing.
Yeah, true. You have spoken of diversity, of gender equality.
Yeah.
And in fact, actually, this is a conversation there are some even from international production houses out here. It's a conversation that's taking place quite strongly in the West as well. Where do you see it going? What movement do you think has been made till now?
I think it's become like a token. It's become like a token thing where everybody's like, oh, we have a diverse cast, but who is your lead? And I know I've been represented internationally for a while, and you're always cast as the exotic Indian girl in a film. And I don't think that has changed much. There are strides being made, but I feel there are very few, like Mindy Kaling is doing some things. There's a show, 2 shows, but that's 1 in a million that's being made. But there could be more stuff that could be done. So diversity is a token word that needs to be explored more and taken more seriously, because brown people are the most populous of the world at this moment.
You make a good point. There is a rise in international collaboration.
Yes.
With Indian films. What's your perception of this? And what do you think of Indian talent on a global scale?
So the rise is there, a little late, but it's there. And Indian talent is doing well. Priyanka is working Rajmouli's song that got appreciated.
In fact, Priyanka's Citadel
it did well, it did well. So there are a lot of things that are happening. We're getting the international platform. It's also, you have to go and settle somewhere. You have to go settle in LA, or you have to go settle in London or wherever if you want that exposure. But what is interesting is because of OTT platforms, people world over are watching our content. And that's quite amazing. And if people could promote that more, they'd understand that it is not only a Rajmouli film that's wonderful. There are small, beautiful films made in Kerala that are outstanding. There are small films that are being made in even Bollywood that are outstanding. In the regional cinema is excellent. Not only the Indian film cinema, that's like Hindi language film cinema is also amazing, but the regional films are also excellent, and that needs more exposure. I mean, we talk about French films, we talk about Italian films, we talk about even Iranian films that are getting such amazing, like they're getting applauded, but we have to look at even our different language, because in India we have so many languages, right? Yeah.
And my last question,
Yes.
if I may ask a personal one. She is one of the most dedicated mothers I have seen, truly is. But we're all waiting for your comeback post your
Oh my
motherhood.
gosh, huh.
And I've heard of 2 projects. So do you want to speak a bit on that, and what kind of projects do you want to be a part of?
I took 2 years off. I was pregnant, and then I wanted to take some time off with my son. And so 2 years are not done yet, but I've signed on 2 films, 2 projects, not films, 1 show and 1 film. And that I will start working on that. So it'll release in another year, because that's how films work.
Is there an exclusive to IGF stuff?
Well, since as a friend, I can talk about it now. And then my idea is to do 2 films, two pieces of content every year. That's it, not more, because I want to spend time with my family as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
To all the descriptions that I gave before on Sonam Kapoor, let's add one, the most important one, a wonderful mother.
Oh, thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sonam Kapoor.
Thank you so much.
And now there's another program coming up which we will be queuing, and I am sorry I've forgotten my cue. Sorry for messing up as Director Nehru Center. Someone will guide me on what to do. All right.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
In 2 minutes, while people get their selfies with Sonam, and we'll be back with an amazing panel, so don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you're all keen to get started again, so we're going to just move on. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Amish Tripathi, the director of Nehru Center, back on stage for another cracking panel.
Hi everyone, namaste. Can everyone hear me at the back? Yeah, all right. Hi. Everyone, it's indeed my pleasure to welcome the panelists for the next subject that we will be discussing, making timeless connections, supporting new, young, and diverse art and leadership. At the beginning, Amruta Fadnavis ji, banker, musician, and social activist from India. If we could have you up on stage, please. And Jaideep Gupte, Director of Research, Strategy and Innovation at AHRC UK. Come. Hey, come. And Alexandra Butler, Director of Literature Across Frontiers. Come. Where would you like us? Come sit. Yeah, I'll sit on the rightmost.
Hi.
Hey. How about if I start with you, Jaideep? If we have to take forward culture to the young, among the things that's thought of is their tastes are very different, could be very different from those pressing the green light on what gets produced, what gets displayed, what gets showcased. How do you bridge that gap?
Thanks for that question, Amish. I take people can hear me at the back. I noticed the room has thinned out considerably after Poonam has left, which is fair enough. Let me just quickly introduce sort of who the organizations that I represent today. So some of you may know already, others may well not, but the UK Research and Innovation is a family of organizations that brings together the 7 research councils, the disciplinary research councils, together with Research England and Innovate UK. So we're a broad, diverse family, and I'm the Director of Research for the Arts and Humanities Research Council. So, with our broad remit across arts and humanities disciplines. So I suppose I take your question to also mean the sorts of, how do future leaders get represented in the sort of research we fund? So a couple of things first. Recognizing that India is a long-standing but also continued and growing priority for the research and innovation landscape, because there's a sense of deep shared cultural heritage, a sense of knowledge exchange between India and the UK. And within this, what we as a council are very keen to prioritize, indeed it's central to our vision, is a route to diversify the sorts of voices that sort of situate, drive the research and innovation ecosystem. Now, how do we do this? For us, creativity as a method is absolutely central, and we recognize that creativity doesn't sit in universities alone, that it's a broad and diverse landscape, and it is fast changing. The ways in which people are connecting, the ways in which people are innovating, the way in which people are creating content is remarkably different. So for us as the Research Council to keep up is to be attentive to what the needs of the research community really look like. We're trying to have a new sort of framework of grants that allows a flexibility. So one thing that we've really recognized is that the sort of Research Council system of funding is quite exclusive. It tends to fund those that have already been funded. So how can we be bold and support the new voices? How can we be bold to support those that have chosen non-traditional career paths, where creators, artisans, artists at the center innovative, team-led, interdisciplinary collaborations. But they don't necessarily have to prioritize research at every stage of their life. I think we as research councils need to understand that and allow that flexibility for the artists, the artisan, the creators to really drive us towards what we see funded. Just to not belabor this point, but to the back end of this is to ensure that how we review those proposals, the grant applications that come through, is also deeply important. It's fundamental to recognize, we were just having a chat in the audience around lived experience. Now, lived experience drives creative content in a way that's so recognizable out there in the real world. But in our systems, our processes of review, it often gets left out. So as a council, we're deeply prioritizing including lived experience experts. So these aren't your traditional professors, these aren't your traditional academics who spent their lifetime acquiring expertise in the field. These are experts who've acquired their experience through their lived experience. And we want to bring them at the center of how we make our grants, and hopefully this will create a more diverse pool of those that receive our funding, and solidifies those.
Because only through diversity of experiences can you have diversity of culture and thought.
Precisely, and that is not to say that there isn't this long tradition of deep cultural heritage that we share across the countries.
Sure. Amrutaji, a question that comes to you when you're when we are speaking of timeless connections, the music that you make, the work that you do, does tend to appeal to the youth. So, question that comes on any artist who's trying to appeal to the youth, that there is a supposition that they don't have much attention span, that they don't have much attention span. They're scrolling up their Instagram reel. They'll give you 5 seconds. If you've caught their attention, good. If not, too bad, right? There simply isn't enough time. How does an artist combat that?
First of all, a very good morning to Shri Amiteshji Tripathi, Amishji Tripathi, and my co-panelists, Dr. Jaideep and Ms. Alexandra. It's an honor to speak here in front of like-minded people who are here to create synergies and see onto how we can provide better opportunities to art in its diverse forms. As you said that yes, opportunities are new with the new digitization and with internet. In fact, India has 120 billion plus mobile users and 600 million plus smartphone users. So accessibility has increased definitely. But at the same time, as you said, there are so many options and people from all over are showcasing their talent and the connoisseurs are coming ahead and absorbing different talents. So it is the game of the best win. Whenever you watch certain things, there are so many options you have. And what appeals to you, strikes to you most, is what works the most. So when you have more opportunities, definitely the competition is definitely more. So we have to be ready for it, toughen for it, and it's the same way that India is doing it. The world looks at India as a young, new kind of power, but I feel it is existing, the power is existing since the civilization itself. So it is a resurgent power in every sense. If you watch the figures or the rise in terms of the publishing, in terms of movie making, in terms of music, in terms of handicrafts and arts and culture, it is astounding. So the credit to this is definitely to the new message which India is giving, that we have arrived, we enjoy and we take pride in our indigenous local aspects, and we do not follow any hierarchical system anymore. So I think so it is about having the pride for yourself and showcasing your best talent that will catch the eyeballs.
Very, very interesting point of view. Thank you for that, Amritaji. Alexandra, if I can come to you with your experiences through literature across frontiers. What is the status of diversity in global literature at this point in time? Are there enough diverse voices coming up? There was a controversy recently on the Booker Prize as well, but it's not just in terms of awards, even in terms of readership, in terms of the books being promoted by publishers, having different voices from across the world. Where do you think that is, and how do you think it can be improved?
Well, that's a very good question.
That's assuming you think it's a good thing. So I'm assuming everyone thinks it's a good thing.
It's something we deal with on an everyday basis as an organization. We were set up 20 years ago, 22 years ago, and we are actually based in Wales. And so I also feel that I represent Wales here, and I would like to thank you for the invitation. It's really wonderful to be here, and I'm pleased to be here with my panelists talking about different art forms. So you're asking about diverse voices. Well, speaking from the position of someone who lives in Britain and in an English-speaking environment, and of course I should stress that Wales is a bilingual country, and the Welsh language is very much used. It's used by writers, it's used by emerging writers a lot, and this is something we support, and we our main aim at the moment, it has been like that for some years now, is to internationalize the careers of emerging writers. We were set up, to go back to the beginnings, we were set up with actually support from the European Commission. And that is significant because we worked across Europe, and we developed a kind of strand of work where we connected European literary scenes with the scenes of the various global regions. So Asia is one of them, and primarily India. We have also worked quite intensively in the Middle East and with the Arabic-speaking region. And our work in India started almost 15 years ago. We were invited to run a workshop which was supported by the British Council, and the aim of that workshop was to showcase multilingualism of the UK. So we had, it was a poetry translation workshop, quite a kind of intimate thing. We stayed in the wonderful Nimrana fortress and in the lap of luxury. And then we went and presented what emerged from the workshop in the Jaipur Literature Festival, which was then, very new. And then we went to the Prakriti Festival Poetry Festival in Chennai, and then to Pune. And that was really the start of, it kind of set the course of what we were doing or have been doing since then. Now, to return to your question, in the English-speaking territories, there is still, we talk in literature, we talk about the famous 3% problem, which is that only 3% of published books are translations. So when it comes to discussing diversity of voices, there is still a sense that there is enough diversity in what's written in English. And so translation is still kind of something that's seen as minor, as a niche effort, and in Britain, translations are mainly published by independent publishers. Fast forward to last year's Booker International, and we have a book. For the first time, the Booker International is awarded to an author who writes in Hindi and her translator. and I'm speaking about Gitanjali
Yeah,
Shri
Samadhi.
and Daisy Rockwell.
We should all
And-
applaud for that book, and
Yes,
those who haven't read it,
yes,
please do read it.
yes.
Redefine Samadhi.
And what that meant for me, as an observer of the scene, was that, yes, an Indian language has been awarded, or a book originally written in an Indian language has been awarded for the first time. And of course, the translator is awarded as well. But it also awarded a book which deals with one of the big themes, really, through a kind of, through a life of one woman. And that's significant as well, because this is what we get from literature. This is what we learn. Recently, William Dalrymple said on Twitter, I follow him quite a lot, something about how little we know about Asian history and how we don't learn about it.
But if I may, sorry to cut in, if I may, just one thing on this, on getting different voices heard. Just the example of Wales itself. The Welsh government supports it strongly, the language. So is it that actually you need the strong support of governments to get different languages heard?
Yes,
and those
yes,
that don't
and
get
that
it,
would be
they
really
suffer?
my point. That we need more investment in this whole field. I usually refer to literature as the Cinderella of public funding, because there's still this sense that a writer just needs a pen or a pencil and maybe a little computer. And now, of course, when AI writes novels, we can probably dispense with the author completely. But no, joking aside, yes, multilingualism, bilingualism, translation really needs investment. And I would like
governments
to
can bring that
refer to the to the very important research study that the British Council commissioned on the Indian literature and publishing scenes, and I recommend that everybody reads it.
Sure.
It's very informative, and it has a set of really strong recommendations, which I hope will be all followed.
Okay. Coming to you, Jaideep, very quickly, if Cinderella, if literature is the Cinderella of the arts, and we need a prince to find the... but coming back on building a bit on that point, that if government support is critical, then even in research, is it that the power of an economy makes a difference? India is a stronger economy now, so Indian ideas emerge. There may be good ideas somewhere else, and the economy isn't strong enough of that country, and they suffer. What do you think on that?
No, absolutely, Amish. So that's a very well put question. Alessandra, just on your point on the Welsh language, I recently spent a bit of time with the Welsh Future Generations Commissioner. A wonderful exposition of how policy making can really be forward-looking, and in a way that's actually practical, right? So if those in the audience don't know about it's the best title to have, to be the Future Generations Commissioner for Wales. Derek Walker has just been appointed, and wonderful set of ideas there in terms of how policy can be practical. Your point on recognizing that ideas can occur anywhere in the world, that's absolutely true. We, the HRC, along with the British Council, Innovate UK, the Department for Business Trade, IPO in India, recently funded a scoping study on the creative industries, where you could really see the might of a sector that in the first panel you heard was described as informal. Yes, there's lots we don't know about it. What we do know about it is that it's deeply aspirational. People want to work. It's deeply impactful in terms of how many jobs are created, the sorts of volume of turnover that is being created in India, in the UK, globally. Now, how do we spot ideas that are in this type of an ecosystem is almost as difficult as how we spot good ideas in an ecosystem where perhaps there isn't this sort of economic might driving it. I think we need to stay true to recognizing that our public research funding has a societal purpose. I think that's a starting point, because otherwise you fail to miss out on where society is headed, and that's quite dangerous. another and slightly different tone is recognizing that it is indeed an ecosystem. And as I say, for us, the creative method, creative spaces. So for us, creative spaces are galleries, libraries, archives, museums, theaters, concert halls, stadia, your street corners, right? So huge range are central, but it's an ecosystem, a research ecosystem that's required with a role for universities, a role for creative spaces, as well as a role for industry.
Yeah, true.
And if
The
we can
partnership
link
between
those three things up, regardless of the scale of the economic consequences, I think there's good ideas to be
You will get some
found.
throughput. And if I may come to you, Amritaji, for the final question, you spoke very rightly of the massive internet revolution in India, and there are many Indians who are experiencing the internet for the first time through mobile phones. How does that open the space for artists, singers, writers? Because has it democratized art in a way? The internet.
Definitely, internet has made it possible that the local artist reaches international levels. That is because of the kind of reach he is getting through internet, through digitization. Here I must mention that we had a song which is called Natu Natu. It got international recognition through Oscars.
Right.
And it was widely recognized, and platforms like these and many more new platforms coming up give them opportunity to go ahead and compare themselves to the best of best. In fact, I must mention here one thing more, that promoting from within, like India promoting tourism from within, or giving the mandate, any country giving mandate to its high commissioners or diplomats to have to institutionalize cultural festivals would go a long way in showcasing the art which each country has. And amalgamating people. Like, I'll give you an example. G20, as you know, India is presiding over it currently. What the Pune Municipal Corporation did when there was a delegation there, it had a heritage walk for the delegates across Pune, wherein it covered places which were not known at all, like Dagru Shed,
Right.
Lal Mahal and all. So it is about being brand ambassadors to your own culture. It is about people-to-people contact. It is about letting others know that yes, you are there and you have the pride in your culture and you are taking care of it. So I think so we have to, with this kind of digitization, yes, we can market it very well. We can market our myths, we can market our messages, but finally it is on the kind of conviction you have for your product, for your environment, which will later help person-to-person marketing even more.
Wonderful, wonderful thoughts to end with. I think as the cultural economy grows, excuse me, deeper, and we have more diversity of thoughts, of languages, you'll find that we will build the timeless connections that will make the Indo-UK bond a lot stronger, and of course India and the UK's influence across the world a lot stronger as well. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much. A wonderful panel. Jaideep, Amritaji, Alexandra, thank you so much. Thank you. I will say this.
What a great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Who's going to chair a panel once again?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I hope everything.
Hello. Still no glasses, but nice bottles.
I think we're on, aren't we? Which way do we go on? Hi, Amish, I'm Philip.
So it's interesting to see connections begin to arise between the different...
Yeah. I don't know if there'll be like a plenary or something at the end. Hello, Bethany, how are you? Very good. You mentioned that 450 million. It's already in your bio. I was going to mention it anyway.
Cool. Great.
But it's always good to be reminded.
Always good. It's just that I noticed that it's a thing that you go, oh, you know, there's
450 million, that's bloody impressive.
Hi. We've seen on, yes. Sachin.
Philip from British High Commission in Mumbai.
Sachin, we've known
Yes.
each other.
I actually just asked it for
So
a
the
summary of
clock is over there.
we had.
Yes. And we've got to be very strict.
Yeah, especially because I've got to go and do another talk somewhere else. It's madness. Okay. Are we ready to go, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back, and in the spirit of recycling and repurposing, here I am again. Two for the price of one. I'm really happy to be here, and actually I did message my mum to say, Mom, there's a Bollywood star here. So I think she's impressed. So we're here for our third panel discussion of the day, and we're keeping it short and punchy, another 20 minutes. And the focus now is on the digital renaissance, revitalising cultural economies in India and the UK. So what we're going to talk about here is with India and the UK budgeting for the promotion and awareness of heritage through a multitude of methods, how can both countries leverage technological and digital affordances to redefine the future of cultural economies and sustainable development? And I have got an utterly fabulous panel with me today. I've got Bethany Hughes, an award-winning historian, author and broadcaster whose speciality is global culture. She's the co-founder of the internationally focused production house, Sandstone Global, that makes films and audio for BBC, Channel 4, National Geographic, Discovery, the History Channel, and ABC, among many others. Her film, Treasures of the World, has been aired in over 120 countries and is regularly watched by 450 million people worldwide. That's quite a figure. Quite a figure. And I think I saw, maybe it was yesterday or today, but there was also an article in the Times in which you were featured. Was that today's Times?
It was yesterday's.
Yesterday's Times. So please look out for that too. Lovely to have you here. My second panellist is Mr. Sachin Devdugal. Welcome, Sachin. You have such an impressive biography, and it's very difficult for me to edit because you've achieved so much in such a short space of time. Sachin is a serial entrepreneur whose AI-powered platform, Builder AI, grew 300% last year and has raised over $195 million since 2018.
450.
Oh, sorry, did I get
450 million.
450 million. That's the speed at which you're growing. It doesn't even keep up with my paperwork. Sachin started his career at the age of 14 by building PCs. And by the age of 17, he had built one of the world's first automatic currency abridged trading systems for Deutsche Bank. While still at university, he started a cloud computing company called Nevo, taking it to just under 100 million valuation before leaving university. Incredible. Lovely to have you here, Sachin. And then my other two panellists, we've got the lovely Mr. Duncan Donan, visiting from Glasgow, up in Scotland. Duncan was recently appointed Head of Museums and Collections at Glasgow Life. After graduating from Edinburgh University, he worked in education for 16 years and was head of department with Aberdeen College. He joined the National Museums of Scotland as museum manager, working on the delivery of the National Museum of Rural Life, a partnership between the National Museums and NTS. Welcome, Duncan. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. And then finally we have Philip Sydenham, who's the first Secretary for Trade in Creative and Sport at the Deputy High Commission, and I believe is normally based in India. Is that correct?
Absolutely, in Mumbai.
And Philip leads on and promotes exports to overseas markets and spreads awareness on opportunities the UK offers to India and the rest of the world. Please, can you give a warm welcome and applause to our fabulous panellists. Thank you. So if I may, I'd like to kick off with the person who's travelled the furthest to be here. Well, technically you have, but furthest in the UK. I'm going to start with you, Duncan. Can you please share with us the approach you're taking in Glasgow around leveraging digital technologies for the protection and preservation of culture? And how are you involving your visitors, based on the fact also that you've got quite a large Indian diaspora in Glasgow? How are you involving your visitors in that process?
Yes, absolutely. So in March last year, Glasgow Museums relaunched the Borough Collection following a 6-year refurbishment, a redisplay and a reinterpretation of the collection of fine and decorative art. At the very start of the project, we were determined to utilise the potential in digital interpretation to broaden and to democratise our audience. As you rightly say, we have a very broad demographic in Glasgow. Almost 10% of our community are from South Asian heritage, so Scotland's most diverse city. And we're determined to see our audience in the museums reflect the full range of our communities. We know that digital is a very powerful tool to achieve that. Use of digital in fine and decorative art context was highly controversial. There was a concern that digital technology, because of the colours and the movement and the sound, would in fact overwhelm the collection and detract from the aesthetic and spiritual experience that people have in that form of museum. But we were confident that was not necessarily the case. We engaged very widely with users and non-users to develop the technology, exploring things like the length of digital content, how long people engage, the gaps between digital content to ensure people would be patient and wait to pick it up. We worked with audiences to develop some of that content. So, for example, with women's groups to examine the response and the context of some of the work by French Impressionist painters in the collection. And we also worked with current contemporary makers to explore the techniques and technologies in some of the objects represented in the collection, all to try to develop digital which would be effective within that context. And we also worked very hard to ensure the digital content was robust, because actually digital which doesn't work is much worse than having none at all. So the digital had to be reliably present as part of the core experience. In fact, we have more than 100 incidences of digital through the gallery, so it's absolutely central to our interpretation. We also developed an approach to digital to identify all of the key learning techniques which people use, to ensure that our digital content represents all of those learning techniques across the galleries, and also digital content aimed at all of the key audiences. So regardless of how you learn, regardless of which segment in the audience you are, you will find digital content across the museum which is directly aimed at you and your needs. And that's proved highly effective. The public response to the digital was incredibly positive. It's a very powerful and important part of our content. The approach we've taken, responding with life-size digital and very muted palettes, means the digital genuinely supports the collection but doesn't overwhelm the collection and really adds to that serene and spiritual experience within the museum. One of the practical but really critical aspects of digital is that it allows us to move seamlessly between languages. So where conventionally in museums, multiple language provision would be primarily English with the occasional panel available in one or two other languages. The digital in the Borough can flip seamlessly between 10 languages at the press of the screen. So the user can select a language. That means that we can genuinely reflect the language of all the people in Glasgow in the core interpretation. And that's a really important point. And that can be expanded very easily. And that capacity in digital is something which in the future I think will be increasingly important and absolutely gives equality of provision and equality of access.
So Duncan, can I ask you, that all sounds fantastic in terms of extending the reach of your collection through using digital technologies. What about people who might not be so comfortable with digital technologies? What about maybe older generations, or how are you maintaining and still building those audiences?
So one of the other aspects of digital in the gallery is to have something which doesn't require specialist skills, so the interface is really very simple and straightforward. So the digital isn't, as was commonly the case, an iPad in a stand, which you operate as an iPad. The interface is very straightforward and simple, and that means that people can just touch and move in the area of it. Some of them you need to do nothing, just walk into the space, and the digital content will activate. So it's really important to ensure that it's not something for a specialist, but something for a general population. The next step in that process, beyond that digital in the gallery, which means that actually we have quite mobile content, is we're now looking at how that can expand into the online arena. That allows us to share our in-gallery content more widely, but also allows us to reach back into the collection to start to make use of those elements which are digital, particularly in relation to a contemporary art collection. Much of that is natively digital, but actually is hidden away when it's no longer on gallery display. So the online platform allows us to make that accessible, and also to make access to our general collections database accessible. And that, together with the language facility, means we can begin to reach out to other institutions in a much more meaningful way.
Fantastic. And so does this mean that you're now able to bring in digitally, virtually, audiences from India into Glasgow? Fantastic.
And possible to connect that directly using pre-existing content.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Duncan. Now I'm going to turn to Bethany. And I understand that you're working in India at the moment. And you've experienced the depth of living heritage and the vibrancy of India. Can you please briefly offer your thoughts on how digitalisation and living heritage can support sustainability?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've just finished a series of films in India which go out on Channel 4 on the 9th of July. It was announced this morning. So
date for your diary.
Please watch. Let us know what you think of them. So just very quickly before I start, two things. One is to say thank you to the Nehru Centre and to our friends and academic colleagues here, because you've helped us with this agenda of using the cultural industries and creative economies to really forward understanding of who we are and where we are in the world. And they're unparalleled in how they've managed to help us to do that. And also, just before I start, a really brief personal anecdote. I know it's always annoying often when people do this, but this is completely germane to our conversation, because it tells us that we should never be intimidated by what's going to happen in the future. I'm going to be really interested to hear what you talk about in terms of AI. So just to let you know why I'm so passionate about cultural heritage and have devoted my life to it. I was a historian back at the end of the 20th century when history was not popular. I don't know if you all remember this. The year 2000 was coming up, and there was this kind of notion that a massive reset button was going to happen, that the past was completely irrelevant, and that there was this sort of shiny, bright new future that we were all going to step in. Obviously, that didn't happen, and I was very aware that history wasn't appearing on television in the way it should. So I arranged a meeting with a BBC producer, sat down, with all my best stories about how inspiring this kind of reservoir of experience was from the past, how illuminating it is, how you can have cultural integration across time and space through history, and then realised one of those things when I was doing all of the talking. There was silence from the other side of the desk, and you could see the sort of tumbleweed blowing through the office. And this producer opposite me said, "Can I just tell you three things, my dear? One, nobody is interested in history anymore. Two, nobody watches history on television. And three, nobody wants to be lectured at by a woman." Now, this was in 1999, not 1899, but 1999. And as you can imagine, that put a certain degree of fire in my belly, and I thought, I have to prove you wrong. And as you said, I've got two of my colleagues up here, Sheila Subramaniam and Dixie Stewart. We passionately make these history programmes. They are watched by 450 million people around the world, but also they seem to have a very cogent impact on behaviour. So a recent series we did about Egypt, when it went out, the Times reported on this. The bookings from the UK for cultural tours of Egypt went up by 4 times the next month. So it definitely changes behaviour. So just to explain why I really care about what I do, and then to answer your question very briefly, philosophically and practically and psychologically and actually physiologically, why this matters and why we can use digital media and other forms of media in an extraordinary way to help cultural heritage is, as a historian, I've always known that history matters. But thank goodness now, scientists are on our side, and we now know that we carry memory right across our brains. So when you access a memory, it's not like you sort of pull out a little chest of drawers. It's everywhere across your mind. And we cannot have a future thought unless we access a memory of some kind. So that might be the memory of an idea or an experience or something that has visual impact on us, but we need memory to move forward. So that's why we're automatically, almost instinctively drawn to books about history, to visiting monuments, to sharing memories. So memory matters. Neuroscientists also tell us that we're at our happiest when we're traveling, when we're moving, when we're walking. That's when our brain is in its alpha state. And that our minds seek disruption, so we seek the new. So if you put all that together, you think actually encouraging sustainable tourism by allowing people to cross borders and boundaries physically and mentally and psychologically to experience the new, to immerse themselves in the lives of others, you're on a win-win situation. But as you say, it has to be sustainable. And that, I think that's where cultural heritage comes in. That rather than people travelling in order to sort of skim across the surface of the present when they go to a place, we should be encouraging them to deep dive into the well of time. So just you know, in kind of very minute terms, if you go to a country, don't go to 3 sites in one day. Go to one site for 1 week and stay there and really, really understand it. So that's something that in the programs that we make, we try to encourage people to do. We try to say, always travel, understanding that you are a guest in someone else's country, and you should only be a guest if your host welcomes you. So travel with absolute respect, make it very clear the dynamic of that relationship. But also in these films that you'll see on Channel 4 on the 9th of July, we try to do things like when we go to the Taj Mahal, we couldn't not go to the Taj Mahal, but we approach it from the back gardens, the kind of overgrown back gardens where we know Shah Jahan mourned his wife, which are open to the public, but a tiny handful of people go there rather than the 8 million who visit the Taj Mahal every year. When we talk about the spice trade in Kerala, we don't just go and meet a cook or a chef. We talk to a historian and expert on the cross-cultural exchange that the spice trade facilitated. And for instance, there are amazing Roman discoveries there that prove the Romans say this is the most beautiful country we've ever seen. And then the Tamil kings write about the Romans and say, they have really good wine, the Italian wine is great. So it's those kind of stories that help people understand that we can live in 2 times at once and that we be connected across time. And, you know, Shiva Subramaniam, who I've already given a shout out to, she was incredibly careful about making sure that we approached cultural heritage in that way from the inside out rather than from the outside in. So it works as a model, and we've got so little time. I'm just going to leave you with 3 beautiful Proto-Indo-European words that I think help explain. I can't understand the future or the present unless I dive back into prehistory, and Amish has just come in. We're both fans of the Bronze Age. Basically, the Bronze Age is where it all happens. So these 3...
I'm a fan of Brittany too.
Yeah, we're mutual fans. But these 3 very beautiful Proto-Indo-European words. One is Widtor, which means a wise agent. And Widtor gives us both the words history and wisdom. So by definition, understanding history makes you wise. There's another beautiful, beautiful word, which is Ghosti, G-H-O-S-T-I, which gives us our words guest and host. And baked into that notion is the idea that the guest and the host are one and the same, that you can't have one without the other. And that as a species, we're programmed to want to welcome strangers across our threshold. There is something about hospitality that makes us human. So that sustainable tourism absolutely fits into that. And the final word, you will all know this, I'm sure, but the word for man and mind and humankind all stem from a Proto-Indo-European root, men or manu, which means thought and thinking. So a man isn't a male thing, it's a thinking thing. And I think that we can use our minds to appreciate the value not just of artificial intelligence, but also of ancestral intelligence. And that's what history does. History... Oh, please. So history reminds us to remember to think better.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Bethany. I'd like us to now turn to Sachin. So Sachin, we can be in two places at once, according to Bethany. And this link between going into the future but taking ancestry with us. Where does that overlap with the work that you do?
Look, I think when you look at the advancements of technology, let's go beyond AI, there are three sort of core pillars that I think are relevant as you think about what the future of culture looks like influenced by the past. And so, and some of these effectively layer into each other, right? One is the ability to have a digital twin. So you're able to, in a way that a mass audience of a future generation wants to absorb, you're able to bring history into that. And I'll give you some examples of this. You know, I'm a huge tennis player, but the average age of someone who watches tennis is 65. And so the sport is dying because young people don't watch it. And then you have to ask yourself why they don't watch it. Well, because nobody wants to watch a 5-set game when 64 players are playing. They all want to watch it when it's quarterfinals and it's Nadal or Djokovic. But it shows you that the audience has moved on, and the format and the way they want to engage in the content is changing. And I think this goes to your earlier point. And so whether it's digital twins, whether it's how content is delivered, because history is very important, because knowing where you came from is a good way of knowing where you could go. And you don't want to make the mistakes of the past, but you want to be inspired from them. But you won't be inspired if it's not delivered in the way you want to absorb. I think the second is, how do you achieve that? Ultimately, every museum or every cultural institute needs to become software first in their thinking. But in most of these institutions, you don't have engineers or computer scientists that are leading the charge of thinking of the art of the possible. And so you end up having partnerships between these institutions and those that can build. The issue you have, though, is you have 500 million developers worth of demand and you have 50 million developers worth of supply. So it's amazing that they built it. I guarantee you there's 1 million cultural institutes around the world that cannot build it. Right? Either they can't find out how to build it, they can't get access to the resource. And so you need to empower people to do that. Now, the beauty with not only the work we do, but the work that artificial intelligence allows you to do is it really reduces the amount of human capacity needed to be able to build these immersive experiences, to be able to build digital twins, to be able to build a way that content can be absorbed. And then I think that the third layer to this is sort of more around the AI, which is, you know, this is probably the second moment in history we have a Da Vinci period. The first moment in history was when Da Vinci was around. He was both an artist, an architect, a physicist, a mathematician. He built things. He wrote backwards so that he couldn't get persecuted. And you think about what's happening with AI today, we think it's a computer science problem. We think it's a policymaker's problem. Actually, it's both philosophy, art, literature, history, for simple reasons where, I give you a couple of examples. I call it the turmeric problem. So you have a model, you know, built by data scientists in London, owned by a company in the US. The data is labeled by someone in the Philippines. So someone labels turmeric. And then you ask yourself, in California, why do you use turmeric? Put it in a latte. You go to Bangalore, why do you use turmeric? Put it in a curry. You go to Vietnam, and why do you use turmeric? It's an anti-inflammatory. And so actually, there's a lot around context. Now, that's a benign example. Now, let's talk about something a bit more pungent. The British Empire.
I thought you were going to say garlic.
No, so you know, or American independence. Imagine you just had a way of teaching it. I think what history teaches you is, and what culture teaches, there's not a single version of the truth. You know, it's beauty in the eyes of the beholder. And so how you would teach those two events in history to a child in New York, to a child in London, to a child in Mumbai, are fundamentally different. Yes, there was an empire. How it got built, how it went away, yes, there was American independence. Why it came about, why it went, how, you know, who was right, who was wrong, they're all interpretations of the truth. And so the real reason why this is a Da Vinci period is We actually need all the stakeholders now to start embracing technology, to realize the ship has sailed, and it's time to get on board, and then to actually help guide how the scientists and the computer scientists and the engineers and the mathematicians are actually designing it. Because if we don't, we'll end up getting a muted version of the truth, where today, unfortunately, those of you who've talked to Bard or Sydney or ChatGPT, it assumes volume is an indicator of accuracy. So the louder you can be, the more noise you can create, it assumes that is the truth. But we know that's not the case. In some cases, the smallest volume can be the truth, especially because you've got this thing called social media that can be easily manipulated or purchased. And so you've got to strike that balance. So I think it's such a fascinating time to be alive. But it's also the time where you need all the disciplines to come together. I keep saying, like, I really think this is Da Vinci version 2, because the things that he was hiding from, we don't need to hide anymore, but we all need to come together.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sachin. So with India hosting the G20 presidency, what would you like to put on the table that gets discussed at that level?
I think it's and I said this in an earlier panel a couple of days ago, AI is the third trifecta. The first trifecta was cloud. We kind of all know about it, but don't really understand it. The second trifecta was social media, which we thought was just like a fun tool, but actually it's far more prolific. The third was actually the technology around AI and how it uses data, and we've failed to regulate the first two. We've sort of become, dare I say it, subservient to our American cousins. And I think now we have this opportunity with India and the UK and the G20 to start to create an equilibrium, because really what we do in the next 12 months will decide the fate for the next 100 years.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sachin. Maybe now is a good time for me to bring you in, Philip, with your responsibility of connecting the United Kingdom with India. What does a digital renaissance mean for trade between India and the UK, and what can we look forward to while India holds the G20 presidency?
Thank you, Hannah. And I really love what Sachin was just saying about this being a Da Vinci period, and I was going to talk along the same lines, that really we're seeing a revolution globally in the creative economy and in the cultural space as well, using digital means. And the UK and India have the power really to be leaders in that digital creative economy sphere, with both being very digitally driven but also highly creative economies. And maybe I just paint you a little bit of a picture of some of the stuff we're working on in that space, which exemplifies some of this. I think there's one bucket which is existing forms of creativity, of culture, which are being changed by digital. Look at things like film. It was great to hear Sonam Kapoor earlier talk about how much Indian filmmakers love coming to London. Some of that is about the technology they find here and the capability. But you just have to look at Natu Natu and Triple R in the movie that was created there to see a masterpiece in many ways of mixing Indian creativity, the Indian style of filmmaking, with incredible CGI and artistry around there. Even in theatre and music. Theatre, we have this lovely new Nita Mukesh Ambani Centre in Mumbai, and its physical tech there. They have this incredible crystal, 1,000 crystals or so on the ceiling, which can be programmed to display images on the ceiling while theatre is happening in front of you, in a very high-tech theatre that's been created there, something that I don't think I've seen in the West End, and that's happening here. And our good friend Tim Brinkman is the creative director there, who's come from the West End to sort of implement some of those techniques there. And there's the second bucket, which is entirely new canvases, entirely new mediums of creativity that are being created by the digital world. And I think I'm being as bold to say we need to see people like Sachin as artists, and his great coders in companies like that, because really they are creating spaces where creativity can be expressed in new ways. For example, I mean, the metaverse, it's a catch-all, but there are UK-India collaborations happening in the metaverse. A company called Redefine from the UK who are exploring opportunities there and building some fantastic collaborations. And we've heard a couple of times already today about mobile phones and the availability of smartphones in India. 700 million is the latest figure I've heard. I'm sure there are various estimates on it, but you can imagine the creativity is in people's hands, but also the ability to receive that creativity. And there's a fantastic online gaming company called Quali who have got a fantastic establishment in Bangalore and have just hit 1 billion downloads of their games this year, based on a UK-India collaboration from Leamington Spa in the Midlands, which is close to where my parents live, where there's a fantastic gaming cluster to Bangalore and some of the fantastic coders and artists I was saying there. So that's why we're so excited about it as government, a little bit of a sort of picture there. The G20 being one platform there, and obviously with colleagues at the British Council, working together with India and the presidency there on preservation of culture, looking back and using technology to help us look back, and some great proponents of that here. But also looking forwards in the creative economies of the future that I've just described. And I think there's some fantastic opportunities there. And worth noting, because we didn't hear the Secretary of State earlier, but we've just launched in the UK our creative industries sector strategy, which I know us on the trade side and you guys on the British Council side worked on very closely together. And one very small part of that is we'll take a trade mission of UK companies out in November this year to a big creative tech festival in India. So please let us know if you're interested in that.
Thank you so much. So a very, very intense contribution, I think, from this fabulous panel. And I think it's a very short space of time to discuss some very deep and global challenges and opportunities. I hope that you will grab them in the break and speak to them or connect with them on social media, with your digital twin, perhaps. What we've heard about is memory matters. We've also heard about how our minds seek disruption. From Bethany, thank you very much. So thank you for the Nehru Centre for hosting us here today. I've thoroughly enjoyed sharing 2 panels with you today, and I've really enjoyed going to other aspects of the India-UK Forum this week, and I'm looking forward to attending more. Please join me in thanking our fabulous panellists. I think they might want to take a picture now. Oh, yes.
Have one final panel. So I'd like to welcome the next panel on stage to discuss the opportunities of collaboration in performing arts.
It's like a sign of our times. That's it.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jay Viswadeva. I have been given this task to moderate this panel, and a very interesting, very strong panel. I see Shamik Datta, Arunima Kumar, and Dr. Debanjali Biswas. Welcome. This particular panel will look at the Indian performing arts from two perspectives, from the UK end and the India end. And during my preamble, which I'm giving you now, there will be 3, possibly 4 questions that will come out of it. But I would like to briefly tell you that way back in 1887, at the court of Queen Victoria, a young Indian musician was invited to perform. His name was Inayat Khan. Not Inayat Khan, the father of Ustad Vilayat Khan, but Inayat Khan from the Lucknow Shahjahanpur Gharana. He played an instrument called the sarod, a lute, and his family was preeminent in transforming the sarod from the rabab. Now, taking that point, which I only came to discover a month ago here on the same dais, that one of his descendants was our principal artist, Ustad Irfan Muhammad Khan. And this particular point, I was quite astonished that so many musicians had come to the royal court pre-independence India. And throughout the British rule, there were many musicians who were invited to perform in the UK. But after independence, the musicians had to travel and fend for themselves because the royal patronage had ended. Post-independence, a lot of festivals in India took shape. Some of them were older than most of the festivals that were established during the earlier period, but they are still running now. And in the UK, a lot of things had happened, and there are some unsung heroes. Not many people will know about these unsung heroes. And this particular point, the festivals that took place in the UK, Edinburgh festivals in America, the Woodstock, the Monterey, and Pandit Ravi Shankar's music, which acted as a catalyst, that too of Ali Akbar Khan Sahab. But there was a point where these musicians had an impresario who took their work across the globe. And this person is the real unsung hero, and his name is Aina Dev Angari. Aina Dev Angari, round about 1946, started the Asian Music Circle. And he and his wife Patricia built up a beautiful producing house under its auspices. Several of the music festivals, concerts, dance dramas were presented, and that included Pandit Ravi Shankar, Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab, the Kathakali of Kalamandalam, and so forth. But it was Aina Dev Angari, the unsung hero, who was instrumental in introducing George Harrison to Ravi Shankar. And through this platform, the Indian music really blossomed. It became widely accessible. And there was a time between the late 60s and 70s that there were far more sitars sold in the West than in India. So what has happened is post-1970, festivals took place in the UK. Organizations were created. One such organization was the Sanskritic Arts Festival of India, which had its base downstairs at the old Nehru Center premises next door. The Bhavan Center was created in 1972, and the organization that I represented founded its roots in 1977 and we're still running. but to share with you the changing landscape of Indian performing arts in the UK is of paramount importance. And there's a reciprocity between India and UK, the synergy, the people involved. We have lost so many great musicians, but we have to find new. And today we have such artists as panel members. In the last 50 years, a lot of organizations have come up. I've seen with my own eyes, because I travel all over UK and India, that there is this wide cross-section of performing arts being presented in the smallest of the venues to the largest of the venues. And I just spent 2 days at the Hammersmith Apollo to witness the 50th anniversary of Shakti, the iconic group. And you can imagine how these musicians have traversed all over the world and have performed at the most prestigious venues, including open-air festivals. I mean, Glastonbury, 200,000 plus. Woodstock was 200,000 plus way back in '69. So was Monterey. So these festivals have been important. Indian contribution in this festival has been important. And today, 50 years, the changing landscape of performing arts in the UK is very strong, very robust. And I say that the arts as soft power is important. So my first question will be to Shamik Datta, who is a wonderful musician, winner of the Aga Khan Music Award, and also one of the iconic young musicians in Britain today, who was tutored by the distinguished Pandit Buddhadev Das Gupta, who taught him the art of sarod. And just imagine that the art of sarod that he has learned today has been transformed into a musician par excellence, a composer, and is traversing all platforms. So Shamik, please tell us why Indian music, Indian performing arts should be considered a good, strong, soft power.
Thank you, Jay. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, actually. I've never been a fan of that term, actually, just because what it does is it illuminates what the antithesis of that is, which is hard power. And that sheds light on a world that is built on capitalism and consumerism, and the arts and music is stifled once it's placed within that core. And I think for that, I try and avoid that term, but I think maybe
it's a digital term, and digitization worldwide is so important. So,
for me, I think it's just having a personal philosophy around why you do what you do. It has to sit at the center of it. And my philosophy is simple, that I think the arts stands apart from everything else that we try and do. We try and make money, we try and pay the bills, we try and put a roof above our heads. And quite often the arts doesn't do any of those things. So what does it actually do? It's suddenly when you lose a parent, or it's when you break up with someone, or when you are forced to leave your house, or you are in some sort of situation that was out of your control, and all these emotions rise. Suddenly, this poem that you haven't really paid that much attention to before becomes the center of your life, because it gives you an anchor to hold on to. So how is that a soft power? That is your power. That is everything. And I think there are records that I would say that work like Bibles to me, and to many people, books, old VHS tapes that my mum introduced me to, Satyajit Ray films, the grainy quality of things, and that has nothing to do with monetization and surviving as an industrialist,
But monetization has been lost substantially because musicians today, apart from the top layer of fraternity, not many musicians get any royalties as such, like the olden days. They have to survive mainly on performances, platforms. And every performance, as you will see all over the world, gets captured by smartphone and shared. In those early days, we could not do that, So, Arunima, how does that relate to your work? Dance. Do you think dance can be used as soft power? So I really like his, approach to power. But I think art is empowering, and it's not a power that we have, which is money or, some control or social control. It is empowering for everybody. In fact, dating back to why Natya Shastra was created in the first place, well, it is believed, as per mythology, that Brahma created everything. There was science, there were all the Vedas, there was, medicine. But at that time, too, the society, there was infighting, there was jealousy, there was envy. And therefore, this Shastra of whether, culture, art, music, dance that we see in India today was created for the primary purpose of, creating that social cohesion. So in a way, this has been continuing for several centuries. And today that's what we see, whether there are cultural ties between India and UK. When I came 15 years ago, nobody even understood what Kuchipudi was. And I came with a certain background from India with certain number of awards. Nobody knew what Kuchipudi was. And I was working in a banking career. I had finished my master's at LSE and was working in a successful corporate life. I quit to start an academy of dance or start an institution because somebody questioned my cultural identity. And therefore, I needed empowering, or I needed to live in the society as a proud Indian. I still do that today. She still does that today. And therefore, I started this institution where I created a certain way of learning, a way of dancing, whether it was making arts accessible, because yes, it is difficult to understand Indian arts. It is an inward journey which is not as accessible, but it was important for me to create that accessibility, to create inclusion when inclusion was not a buzzword. Today it's used everywhere, but it wasn't. For me, I feel that it is empowering. It is a way of understanding each other and appreciating the aesthetics of two cultures. And for me, I have been able to, empower, not really use it as a soft power, but the very fact that we are talking about it today means it's relevant. So empowerment is important rather than soft power. Yes, it is everything. I would say culture and art and culture is very, very empowering and very powerful. And it should be institutionalized. An institutional ecosystem should be created to support culture. And we're sitting in Nehru Center talking about it. So this is an institution of culture that promotes that cultural exchange. And with wonderful artists in UK and India today, and an appreciation of India, like yoga, Ayurveda has become so relevant and popular. Indian dance and music is an untapped potential. We have to leverage it to be able to really make it accessible to the world. I'm not saying make it, natu because we are not mass, but at the same time, we have spirituality, well-being, skill, everything in this particular, art form, whether it's music or dance, any form of classical dance in India. It is so rich. So when Indians feel, oh, we don't want to do Indian classical, we would prefer to watch something which is a fusion. I say, don't find freedom from your culture, find freedom through your culture. And that to me is empowering. That to me is power. Thank you. Dr. Debanjali Biswas, you are scholar of performance studies, cultural anthropology. You graduated from King's College, and you've been working on your thesis, Performance and Violence in Everyday Life in Manipur. So my question to you is about women, because women are underrepresented in many fields. So tell us about your knowledge, your experience in the work of women artists in the area that you cover. Thank you. That's an interesting question. Interestingly, traditional arts actually has a lot of women artists. It's one space where women artists are probably at par with male artists. However, it's not about what they do, whether it's considered art, what they produce, how it's circulated, but it's what they get in return. Because women artists, in most cases, are not just artists, but they are also core member of the household. They put in domestic labor as well as creative labor. A lot of it goes unrecognized. So whether you're looking at community art or whether you're looking at traditional art, or whether you're looking at art as leisure, whether these women are dancing as a hobby, whether they're doing it as a profession, there are very different categories in which these women artists find themselves, and accordingly they find themselves, they get the payment for it, or they get the recognition for it, they get awards for it. So male artists are sometimes, actually let's forget the gender binary for a bit. In many different art forms, for example, what is now Bharatanatyam, it's male gurus who have been teaching female artists for a very long time. In the dance form that I do, there are no such gender boundaries. Men and women dance together, they learn freely, they dance together, whether it's the classical arts or the community arts. It again depends from regional forms within India. And then of course we have gender-defying arts, we have cross-dressing as arts. So there are many ways women are not just contributing as artists, but also in the creative industries. So it's one space where women really feel powerful. And to bring on something from what Arunima was saying, art is something which makes, in my research or in my past life I have seen, it makes them feel really powerful. They own that space and they feel that they thrive in it. But what happens from the other side, if it's not recognized that their artistic self is something that is also a part of them, and they're just not a mother, a worker, a citizen, that energy that they put towards art, that gets deflated. Thank you. In my earlier talk, I mentioned about patronage. Up to 1947, the artistic fraternity of India were supported by the courts they served. Post-independence, they lost their support and they had to go their way. So today we have a problem. Patronage, public versus private. And in the UK, we have funding bodies like the Arts Council, PRS Foundation, the British Council, and other affiliated organizations who are funding some interesting projects. Many of the organizations now recently have become national portfolio organization that gives them a kind of a sufficient time length to establish, to sustain, and present well-produced work. But that's public funding. Shamik Datta is supported by the Arts Council. Arunima is supported by the Arts Council. Devanjali, do you get any public support?
No.
So my question now is that why there is lack of private funding from the Asian business houses, Asian communities in the UK? I see no such support. So Shamik, tell us, have you ever been supported by private funding?
Very rarely, but yes, I have. I think inherently the issue comes back to we don't really know what artists are. And the only way we can recognize artists is through the lens of them as a celebrity, because that's a code that we understand. And it's the only way that artists can survive, by presenting themselves as a celebrity. And this thing is perpetuating itself through social media and Instagram and all of this stuff, and it's a black hole.
It's become a democracy because you don't need agents, you don't need managers. You're your own boss.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're getting money.
Yeah,
but they're just shifting themselves to be seen as someone who looks like they should and they could. What all of this does is that it somehow distracts us from this idea. Well, you guys can speak to this as well, but as an artist, I feel that the core word that I hold quite deep inside is craft. And that is, what's the difference between a practitioner and a musician, And a practitioner is someone who does it regardless. Every day, day in and day out, hours, and they're not counting the hours. This whole thing about 10,000 hours to become a virtuoso, it's, you don't count the hours, you just, anyway.
Thank you. Arunima, quickly, we are running short of time. What do you think? I think it is a very important problem to remain sustainable, because while Arts Council does fund us now, we don't know about the future. The pot is limited and there are many hands to divide it. So there is a critical need, not just for Indian or Asian business houses, but for private sponsors to come in and support artists. What we at my organization have tried to do, we've tried to create a giving program. We run a bursary program, and we've tried to initiate some corporate sponsorship within ourselves so that we can sustain. But it is a problem. Devanjali?
Quickly, in 3 words: pay the artists. That's it. It doesn't matter which.
Can I just add to that? Pay the artists and leave them alone.
Because it doesn't matter. You know what? If you're an institution, if you're an organization, if you're a business house, you must have someone who is there who understands art. And at some point of time, you might be able to understand that there are early careers, mid careers, established artists, people who do it for leisure, people who do for practice, people, whatever. Just evaluate what kind of art they do and pay accordingly, but don't let them go without any form of payment. If you start it small, it's going to build up to the organization. Even for any particular event, if you say, we can't pay you, that's it. That's where
it breaks down.
Where it breaks down.
Yeah. Thank you. Just to round up 1 minute, my next question was to be protection of intellectual property rights. We have a legal case in the Indian diaspora between A.R. Rahman and the Dagar family on a copyright situation. We have a lot of things to talk about that, but we don't have time. So if anybody would like to exchange notes, whatever, I'll be around, and the artists are going to be here as well, so you can exchange views. Thank you to iGlobal Nehru Center for this wonderful platform. I'd like to thank Shamik Datta, who, by the way, has been he's now a resident, artist in residence at the Philharmonia. Congratulations. Arunima and Devanjali, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, so I'm the only thing now standing between all of you and lunch, so I'll make it very, very brief. On behalf of India Global Forum, I'd like to thank our partners Nehru Center and British Council. We plan to scale this up even bigger next year, And we very much hope that all our speakers who have been kind enough to join us this year and take time out of their busy schedule will be able to join us again. And on that note, I shall now invite you all to take part in our final interactive cultural exchange, which is also called lunch. So thank you everyone for joining us today.